Welcome to Development Hell. Available now from Dread, the Queen of Spades. According to legend, an ominous entity known as the Queen of Spades can be summoned by performing an ancient ritual. 4 teenagers summon the Queen of Spades, but they could never imagine the horrors that await them. The Queen of Spades is available on demand everywhere and on Blu-ray, July 3rd, 2021. For every horror movie that hits VOD, countless others end up DOA. Development Hell is the podcast dedicated to unearthing these cursed horror productions. We're going to find out what went wrong, and then decide if these titles still stand a shot at the green light. I am your host, Josh Korngut. I am a filmmaker in Toronto, Canada. This podcast is a proud member of the Dread Podcast Network. So today we are talking about Guillermo del Toro's The Haunted Mansion. Guillermo del Toro is someone that has endless amount of projects stuck in development hell. We've covered them before, and we will cover them again. But this is one that I've always been really interested in. I'm obsessed with gateway horror, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But today we have a really exciting guest. We have David Weiner with us. Hi, David. Can you introduce yourself? Because I feel like you'll just do a better job.
Sure. This is David Weiner, and this is the sound of my voice. I am a documentary filmmaker, arguably a long-form documentary filmmaker. I've made In Search of Darkness and In Search of Darkness Part 2, which are about 80s horror movies. And I'm working on, as we speak, In Search of Tomorrow, which is about 80s sci-fi movies. Prior to being a documentary filmmaker, I was and still am an entertainment journalist. I was a magazine editor of Famous Monsters of Filmlight magazine. I worked for Entertainment Tonight for 13 years, writing for them. And I've done a thing or two, and I was even in development. And so I know I've had a bird's eye view, fly on the wall view of development hell.
Okay, so you're the bad guy. You're the one that we're always complaining about. Then
that's why I got out of development.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get to that. To that.
You didn't want to be the suit anymore. That's fine.
I would say that I finally put the cherry on top of a career that I was already very happy with. I came out. I went to film school and at Ithaca, upstate New York, Ithaca College Film School, and then I came out to California and Los Angeles to Tinseltown and wanted to pursue my film dreams. And the first thing I wanted to do was work on a movie set, and I accomplished that right away. And I worked on movies, running around with a walkie-talkie and a headset as a assistant director, as locations, as a PA, as a stand-in, as art department, as locations, as whatever I could do. And I did that for 4 years on movies, on TV, commercials, and music videos. And but I realized after 4 years of standing around on a set for 15, 18, 20, 24 hours a day, I realized I probably didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And also no one was going to hand me a movie to write or direct. So development was what I looked at next. And I realized I need to understand how a script goes through the development system and gets made. How does anything get made? First of all, you got to either do it yourself or show that you can do it. And second of all, I figure if I'm going to learn how scripts do get made, how projects do get packaged and put together, why not do it from the ivory towers where all these scripts go through the machine? And that was kind of my approach.
How do you find the difference between the sci-fi fans and the horror fans? Is it massive?
I think there's really good genre filmmaking often is crossover anyway. So sci-fi, Aliens is like the ideal answer to that, or
Mm-hmm.
Ghostbusters, there's a little bit of horror, there's a little bit of action, there's a little bit of comedy, there's a little bit of sci-fi, there's a little bit of darkness, there's levity. You got a little of everything, and I think just a creative storytelling, is really what I personally gravitate to. And I find the fans, some people are a little more polarized, where you really have the hardcore horror fans, and that's really what they're all about. That's their identity. Sci-fi, same way, but a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved all of them. That's why Famous Monsters was such a great magazine for me when I was a kid growing up, because I was into the fantasy. I was in, Ray Harryhausen movies and stop motion animation and King Kong and Planet of the Apes and George Powell's sci-fi and Roger Corman, B movie
Mm-hmm.
horror, all that kind of stuff came together with classic, with Godzilla and classic Universal, monsters, and all this stuff was encapsulated in one magazine, Famous Monsters magazine, which was sci-fi and fantasy and horror, and it was just movie history and sort
Uh-huh.
of peeling back the layers there, and so yeah,
Stupid question, but are they still around? I'm guessing no.
It's not a stupid question. It's actually a very good question, because the magazine started in 1958 and it went straight through till about 82, and then it
Uh-huh.
disappeared for about 10 years, and then it came back in different iterations and forms, and came and went and came and went, and then it came back. Phil Kim was the publisher, and he got the rights to make the magazine, and I came on first as a writer, and then as managing editor, and then executive editor of the magazine, which was, pinch me. I get to be the editor in chief of the magazine I loved as a kid.
Wild.
And that was in 2015 and 2016. And the magazine is no longer around. But who knows? Maybe one day someone will buy it
I
or
was just
license
gonna
it and
say,
bring it back.
maybe it'll be you. Who knows?
I might have been someone who tried at a certain point.
Oh, really? Well, you know what they say? If it doesn't work out the first time, give up. Don't
Yeah,
keep
there we go.
don't keep going. You're busy.
Yes, I
Um,
think I think Mark Hamill says, "Give up on your dreams or try." One of the two.
so everything you said kind of leads me to get a bit of an answer for this next question. But I wanted to know, why did you pick Haunted Mansion? What drew you to this?
The Haunted Mansion. I should probably give a background to my give and take with Disney over my lifetime.
Perfect.
When I was a kid, I went to. I'm happy to reveal my age. I was born in 1968, so I was a 70s kid and an 80s kid. I was like a 70s kid and an 80s teen. And when I was a little kid, Disney World had just opened. I
Whoa.
grew up in New York, and my parents went there and took me there, and those are some of my earliest memories.
Hmm.
So I've been very fortunate to have Disney as part of my life just ever since I was a kid. Even to the point where Chip and Dale, they tickled me so hard and they wouldn't let me go that it was absolute pain, and I now have a vendetta against Chip and Dale. What's the deal, man? But
Oh, a trauma maybe.
I think so. I was laughing so hard and they just wouldn't let go. It did
For
become
about 3 seconds, I
from.
thought you were talking about a male strip club, but I got there. I'm
No,
with you.
no, no. You got to pay that. You got to pay them to tickle you. But
Yes,
whereas Chip and
generally.
Dale, they do it for free. But
Yeah.
we
Oh.
we digress. But the thing is, ultimately, as you get older, most people, at least of my age, it was cool to be very cynical about Disney and the Mouse House,
Hmm.
MAUS, that kind of
Mm.
stuff, and
Oh yeah.
it's corporate, whatever it may be, and but then you realize I still love going to Disneyland and Disney World. It's fun. How could you not like that stuff? Because the older I got, the more I really recognized the incredible artistry, craftsmanship, the attention to detail in
Oh
all
yeah.
of their rides, their concepts, everything in terms of the theme park. And so then when you have a kid, you get to embrace what you ultimately rejected because you kind of have no choice. So I sort of, the pendulum swung back, and I've been to Disney. I live near Disneyland in Los Angeles, and
Hmm.
I've been there more times than I could even tell you. And it's
Jealous.
an absolute thrill just getting my kid to go there. And to
Oh yeah.
answer your question, because I do believe you had a question there, is
Hmm.
that Haunted Mansion. Of all the things that I do there, other than maybe the thrill of Space Mountain, and now the fact that they have Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but other than that, Haunted Mansion was always my go-to spot, and it's one of
Hmm.
my son's favorite places, and because he's a chip off the old block, it brings me so much joy. And so I have always wanted the ultimate haunted mansion movie. And when we did get it on it, I guess we'll get to it. But when we did get to a haunted mansion movie with Eddie Murphy, I already knew something was amiss before I even saw it. But I still saw it with high hopes, and I just,
Yeah, I saw
I
that
would.
today for the first time, and
Oh, for the first time.
for the first time, and I'm
I
very
want to
excited.
know what you think when we get to
We're
it.
gonna get there.
All
I
right.
promise. I promise you. But before we do, I'm going to give our listeners just a little bit of background on the Haunted Mansion attraction. So the Haunted Mansion is a dark ride at Disneyland, Disney World, Tokyo Disneyland, Paris Disneyland, and Hong Kong Disneyland. So it's all over the world. It opened in 1969, and riders would go through a haunted mansion resided by 999 happy haunts. I was going to ask you if you'd ever been on the Haunted Mansion ride, but yes, of course you have. So instead, I'm going to say, do you remember the first time you went on a Haunted Mansion ride?
I do not remember the first time. I cannot tell you if I went when I was 3 years old, when I first went to Disney
Mm,
World. In fact, I don't think they had it at Disney World. I could be wrong. You said it opened in 1969,
in
but I think that was at
Disneyland, though,
Disneyland.
you are
So,
correct.
so there you go. So when I went to Disney World in like 1971, I don't think it
Mm.
existed yet. And
Oh,
so the first time I went to Disneyland was in 1980, and so it
cool.
had to have been then.
I love it. Disney World had my favorite Disney ride, which was, I think it's gone now. Yeah. Tower of Terror.
Right, right, yeah.
Oh, so good. I don't think that's at Disneyland. Am I wrong?
They do have it. It's a California Adventure. So
Oh, I hate
Disneyland
that.
has that separate theme park, California Adventure. They turned
Oh,
Tower of Terror, which I went to the opening of Tower of Terror at California Adventure when I was at
cool.
Entertainment Tonight, and I could do things like that.
Cool.
And so I went to the big opening party, and it was super cool. And now it's a Guardians of the Galaxy ride. And all I can say
Right.
is that the ride itself is super cool. I wish it was the Twilight Zone, but it's not.
Oh, yeah.
And now
I
they
was
they
so
just opened up
scared.
Avengers Campus there
Ugh.
nearby.
Listen, I'm now the older generation that, is just not, it's, this content's not for me. All the superhero stuff, it's not really targeted at me, and so I'm mad about it, but I'm sure it's bringing many kids lots of joy, so I don't want to take that away from them.
Please don't.
For me, my first time going on the Haunted Mansion was probably, was it 1997? And I'm sorry if this, I don't know, you don't care about age. It was 1997, and I was in grade 2.
Uh-huh.
And while I'm now a huge, huge horror fan, I was like a very pansy child. I was very nervous about everything. And I had like a conniption on this ride. My mom still talks about it to this day. Because you get in there and it feels like you're locked in, and those portraits start to move, and it was overwhelming for me. And I
Wow.
remember I couldn't look, and I remember the whole time my mom was like, it's nice, you should look, it's awesome. And then about halfway through, I opened my eyes and I thought, well, this is my identity now. This is who I
Hmm.
am. And I've never really looked back.
These are
I
the
lo-
things. If I could just interject,
Please, please.
pun intended or not, they haunt you.
Oh, yeah.
There's something about a very early memory that was not quite right or different or not what you expected, and
Oh, yeah.
you really do end up kind of chasing that down to confront it and deconstruct it and understand it, arguably for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's usually the sort of the subconscious attraction to wanting to talk about it today.
I mean, I feel like you know better than anyone with your series. Even in the title alone, I feel like it's alluding to what you're saying right now. In Search of Darkness, if anyone forgot. Um, I love, like, I think a lot of horror fans love gateway horror, but for me, it's like, it's a big deal. Like, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, R.L. Stein, Christopher Pike. Like, I haven't managed to let go of that stuff yet, and it's informed me creatively over the years, and you can see that with Guillermo del Toro also. You can see that this is a genre or even dark filmmaker who's really inspired by like child wonder.
Hmm.
And I think when you combine that with maybe more adult themes, like you can get some amazing storytelling out of that. Are you a Guillermo del Toro fan? Are you specifically interested in his work?
I am a huge Guillermo del Toro fan. I have spoken to him several times by way of Famous Monsters.
Mm.
And he had this wonderful exhibit at the LA County Museum of Art
Mm-hmm.
that I got to go in, and that was a real ultimate convergence too, because he is the ultimate geek, and that's one of the reasons why I connect with him. Is I don't think he's posturing. I think it's
Oh, it's
absolutely
real.
genuine,
It's legit. Yeah.
and he had his own collection of original Famous Monsters magazines, and he literally put them on display at a
Oh,
museum. And so while I was editor, I could stand by Famous Monsters in a museum exhibit at the LA County Museum of Art, and I felt this is Nirvana right here.
that's wild. A little cerebral. I got to see. I'm pretty sure I got to see the same exhibit. It came to Toronto,
Yeah,
and
it
it
worked its way around.
yes, it sure did, and it was like I found it really moving. More than I thought I would because I connect with him so much. There was a section called I think it was called the Rain Room
Hmm.
where he are you familiar with what I'm talking about or do you
Keep
I'll
talking.
oh yeah. So he had a section in the exhibit called the Rain Room when it looks like a gothic office.
Yes. I remember
Yeah.
this. Yes,
And he has this installation in his home where
yes.
it's a beautiful gothic office and all of the windows are actually LED screens
Uh-huh.
with projecting like a lightning storm or a rainstorm. And there's also like an amazing sound system projecting that in the room as well. So it just feels like you're in this beautiful gothic haunted office in the middle of like an extreme thunderstorm and it's perfect.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I think every house should come with like a bathroom, a rain room, and like a little porch because I just think it's really important for the soul.
Well, it's like, when people are, they're kind of depressed and they need, that vitamin D. Doctors say get out in the sun. You literally need that for your body. And I think
Yes.
the inverse is also equally important. It's like when you're in kind of a mood, or you want to sort of wax nostalgic, but it's not
Hmm.
a happy place. I by all means, I mean, I in Los Angeles, we do not get the thunderstorms that I used to get when I was a kid growing up, or just most people get anywhere else. But in Los Angeles, it's a rare occasion to have a thunderstorm, and I really, really, really miss that. And where your creativity and your mind wants to go when you're in that frame of mind.
I understand that. I live in Toronto and we have amazing rainstorms, and I've always fantasized about going to LA, but I think that would be really tragic to lose that.
Yeah, it's there's a summer season and then there's the rainy season. So usually, like in November, November through March or so, it rains a lot more.
Hmm.
But yeah, growing up in New England, where it could just rain at the turn of a dime, whatever the phrase would be, it just rains, drop, 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 and then downpour.
Oh, so you
Um,
grew up in Stephen King country? Is that what you're telling me?
yeah, exactly. I grew up in Westchester, New York, and I went to school in New England and upstate New York. So I just know that the
Well,
weather could
yeah,
be
no,
like
no
that.
wonder you're spooky.
But then I went to the first time I ever came out to California. I had an uncle out here, and he's like, he was driving a convertible, and he parked the car, and we went to lunch. And I said, "Aren't you going to close the convertible?" He's like, "Why?" I said, "Well, what if it rains?" He looked at me, and he's like, "It doesn't rain. It won't rain. It can't rain in the summer." And I just could not wrap my brain around
Tragedy.
that. But now I understand.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I gotta stay where I am. Uh, so Guillermo del Toro is, as I think I mentioned earlier, notorious for having just more unproduced projects than actual produced ones. Some of them which are maybe more famous than others would be his Disney Wind in the Willows, his adaptation of the Halo video game, Hellboy 3, which is one that means a lot to me and I will cover at one point, The Hobbit, Justice League Dark, At the Mountains of Madness, and many more. Is there anything from this list that resonates with you as, particularly tragic of a loss?
I was really hoping that he would get to do another Hellboy movie, because
Oh, me too.
Hellboy is one of Hellboy might sit at the top of my favorite. I mean, I love Pan's Labyrinth, but in terms of just pure entertainment value, Hellboy is so fun.
I love
Um,
it. I'm
and
with you
uh,
here.
and I'm one of those people who I love comic books, but I'm not a comic book geek. So that movie, before I got into Mike Mignola's comic work, that was my introduction to Hellboy. I knew it was a comic, but I'd never read it, and so I figured title alone it was a lot darker and less whimsical than it ended up being. And then Hellboy 2 really got super duper duper creative. And that was at a time when CGI had gotten so out of control that anything that was a CGI film, I just immediately it turned me off because it wasn't tangible, it was fake. And so here comes Hellboy 2, where you have all these amazing creature effects and amazing in-camera effects that it's all practical, it's all tangible, and that really put Guillermo on the tops of my directors to watch. By then I already was, but
I
it
love that
cemented
answer.
my love. So I'll just say real quick with Hellboy 3,
Yeah.
I know that he wanted to do it, but I also knew that he couldn't get enough money to do what he really wanted, and it was sad.
Yeah, very sad. And I love Hellboy being your answer for a favorite Guillermo del Toro movie because A, very non-pretentious answer, and B, they're so good. I especially resonate with that second Hellboy movie. They're just so magical and entertaining. They're like perfect.
The
And
pretentious answer would be, oh, why hasn't he made Mountains of Madness yet?
yeah,
Where
that would be.
I want to see Cthulhu, but it's like anything, with Lovecraft. But I really wanted to see his Hobbit.
Hmm.
I wanted Peter Jackson. When Peter Jackson said, "I'm going to produce it, I'm not going to do it." Yeah, of course, we all know he ended up doing three of them again. So he did six, Middle Earth movies. But when Peter Jackson, for a moment there, was having problems with New Line and Warner Brothers, and wanted to only produce, and Guillermo was in line to do it, I was gung ho for it to happen. Furthermore, I wanted to say that when when Disney said they're going to make a bunch of anthology spin-off one-off movies, for Star Wars, or that they were going to look for another director for the next Star Wars movie, whatever it would be. I so badly wanted Guillermo to do a Star Wars movie, and maybe he would.
Phenomenal. And can you imagine the alternative universe where he made the Hobbit films and instead of what we actually got?
Yeah, just his imagination. I'm going to step one step forward and just say I believe Crimson Peak was sort of tangentially his Haunted Mansion movie because he didn't get to make Haunted Mansion.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up because Crimson Peak is very obviously, at least to me, feels like, he really wanted to make this Haunted Mansion movie, and that's kind of what he made instead. I will be honest with you, it's one of my least favorite of his outings, even though tonally and visually, it's everything that I would ever want. But for some reason, I've only seen it once, but the story kind of fell flat for me. And maybe it's just, it flew too close to the sun for my interests, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. For me, I'm in agreement that I believe it looked better than the narratively it was. Um, I have kind of like a three strike rule with leaps of logic, and if the first one can come and go and it catches my attention, but I won't dismiss a movie based on just anything because I understand how difficult it can be to pull off a story. But once you get a second strike and then the third strike, it takes me out. And his movie, unfortunately, with leaps of logic, just to sort of get from one point to another, ultimately disappointed me. But I believe, I think about that movie a lot from a visual
Yeah.
standpoint, and I do plan to return to it simply because it's. I think now that I'm over the fact that I was a little disappointed, I think I'll probably appreciate it that much more.
I think I'm going to be the same way. I think I'll probably like it a lot more. Although I will say the casting, it's just not. It's
Well, it's
not the
Tom
casting I would
Hiddleston.
have.
I'm in the midst of the Loki TV series,
Series.
and
Uh
so
huh.
it's making me saying, "Oh, what other Tom Hiddleston can I see? I don't want to go to Kong Skull Island again. What can I watch? Maybe I'll go to Crimson Peak again."
Yeah, he wasn't here nor there in my memory of it, but I don't know how to say her name, but Alice in Wonderland,
Right,
Mia something.
Mia
Can you help
Wasikowska.
me out? Thank you. I don't know. I don't. There's not a lot going on over there.
I
And also
probably
with
butchered Mia's name too. Sorry about
listen, you better you than me.
that.
And was it Eva Green, another person that I'm just not that interested in at the
Yeah.
end of the day. But I do love Del Toro, and I hope I would I would love to see a Hellboy 3. But with that Hellboy reboot, it makes it feel like it's never going to happen. Which I never saw it. I never saw the Harbor Hellboy.
I avoided it, and then I did watch it, and I actually found it to be much more entertaining. I got over it. I have a strange approach to a lot of these sort of reboots and remakes and things like that. At first, I just say I'm happy with what I've seen, so I don't need to see this. But then oftentimes my curiosity gets the best of me, and I'll be like, well, if it's right in front of me and I'm not sure what I want to watch, I'll give it a go. And I do like David Harbour, and I think
Yeah, he's cool.
his that movie was much because it got so universally panned by critics and fans, arguably alike for the most part. I know there are a lot of people who really did like it. With that in mind, I was like, well, how bad can it be? And watching it, I was like, well, actually, this is quite entertaining. So I would say it's actually a good movie if you can get over all the baggage.
And I can't. And I refuse to. And I think that's my right. So speaking again about the Haunted Mansion reboot, I'm going to just give us a little bit of background on it. So at the 2010 Comic-Con convention, Del Toro did announce that he was working on a Haunted Mansion film. He wasn't a big fan of the 2003 version, which we still have yet to discuss, and he wanted to make something darker and something a little bit more elevated, something that didn't take place in this world per se. He was going to bring back the Hatbox Ghost. Now, before I get into that, were you familiar with the Hatbox Ghost before today?
Well, before today, absolutely. In fact, I've seen the Hatbox Ghost in action when it returned to the Haunted Mansion. And now I'm not. Listen, I love all this stuff, but I'm not such a hardcore fan that I knew when it was back and planned a visit to see it. So it was a genuine surprise when I was on the Haunted Mansion on one of my trips to Disneyland. I'm like, wait a minute. That's the Hatbox Ghost. He's not supposed to be there. When did they put that in?
2015, baby.
Well, there you go. So
I
got to enjoy it in an organic fashion
I love that
without the build up or the hype. So yes, I know about the Hatbox Ghost.
That's awesome. So for people at home that may be less familiar with the Hatbox Ghost, the Hatbox Ghost is kind of a Disney legend of some kind. He is an animatronic character that originally appeared at the Haunted Mansion opening day, but was removed quickly after because the effect didn't work so great. So the effect of the Hatbox Ghost is you have like an elderly, spooky man holding a hat box, and when the light shifts, his head disappears from his shoulders and appears in the hat box, and he was in the attic of the Haunted Mansion. I for so long assumed that maybe he was removed because he was too scary, but it seems that that's not the case. He was actually just, it didn't work back in the 60s.
It just didn't work. It was a very cool idea. There's something about, you said it's a dark ride. When you say it's a dark ride, does that mean literally or conceptually?
Literally, like it's like a literal dark ride.
Well, conceptually, it goes there too.
Yeah.
I mean, but they're grim, grinning ghosts. So it says it right there in the song, in the title, right? They're grim and they're grinning and they're ghosts, and so it's a ghost. It's death, but it's also like happy. This is happy. It's the happiest place on earth. So they managed to have it both ways. I think that's also kind of the appeal for me for the Haunted Mansion as far as the ride is concerned with Disneyland or Disney World, because that's kind of a bit of a tightrope to walk, where you don't want to, show death and dismemberment and, like a bride with an axe. And I mean, this is all potentially very dark stuff, but it's sort of the spirit of Halloween. Halloween, you could have ghosts and ghouls and, someone with a knife through their head and everyone laughs and loves it. Any other time of year, out of context, it's horrifying. And so this is kind of the same way. I just want to add that with the Hatbox Ghost, I think back then it just didn't work properly. It wasn't a believable effect. When I saw it, apparently they cracked the code, they figured it out. And this is just me and my perception of it because I didn't really know the whole story about why it didn't work. To me,
Hmm.
it looked like a present day computer generated effect, but in a practical way. So I felt it's not a trick of the light. It has to do with projections and so on and so forth. But I was less impressed by it. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I can see what they're doing. It's kind of cool, but I'm not impressed by it. I've always been more impressed by the floating crystal ball
Oh yeah,
and Madam, what's
Jen-
her name?
Jennifer Tilly.
Well, yeah, Jennifer Tilly in the Haunted Mansion movie, but
The best
there,
part of the Haunted Mansion movie, actually.
yeah, well, the most legit
Yeah,
as
yeah.
far as I was concerned. But that's always been an amazing effect because it floats in front of your face. You work your way around it in a semicircle. So
Hmm.
as soon as you think, well, I could figure it out, there's a projection within a floating ball that's floating up and down. It's magnificent, and it's one of those sort of Disney illusions that has my utmost respect because I can just enjoy it for what it is, even when I try and figure out the magic trick.
I love it. I am still like taken aback by some of those old school effects
Hmm.
that they just, because I know nothing about how they work. It's a little shocking
Well, it's
sometimes.
almost like when you get into the graveyard where you have the statues singing grim grinning ghosts, and
Hmm.
the statues are singing. And I think you ultimately figure out that it's a projection. But the first time you ever see that, you're in that zone. You've been through three-quarters of the entire ride, and by that point, you're just buying what they're selling, and it's just amazing. That's why I love the Haunted Mansion so much. I can't wait to go back. Just talking about
I can't wait either. It's one of my first like big trips I'm going to plan after everything's said and done is Disney World, and I cannot wait.
it. Yep.
I feel like this is a clumsy moment to sort of backtrack to the 2003 film that I'd like to touch on, but we don't have to stay here for too long. But because I did
Sure.
suffer through it very recently, I feel like
It's fresh. It's
I have to.
the
Yes.
horror is fresh in your mind. I
The horror
understand.
is fresh on my mind. I just want to like, oh, the acting was just not incredible. Like, I know that's not the movie's number one issue, but the whoever played that wife, either she was given literally nothing to do, which is true, but was yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's Marsha Thomason.
that is.
Haunted Mansion, the movie, is very much like, and in comparison, the other one is better, but like the Golden Child. Eddie Murphy, big star, makes lots of quips and very charismatic. I love Eddie Murphy, even in movies that he's not very good in. But sometimes it's oil and water. Sometimes it just doesn't fit. And
Hmm.
when it's a fish out of water, sometimes it's fun. I've always felt like the Golden Child was like a really amazing fantasy where he just shows up and is obnoxiously quipping the entire time, and it doesn't quite gel. And I
Yeah.
felt the Haunted Mansion was that exponentially worse. And
Oh yeah.
so there are nice little nods to the ride and the attraction that are sort of Easter eggs or inside moments that you could recognize. But um, I just felt like it was Disney saying, "All right, we've got Pirates of the Caribbean. What other rides can we make?" It came out the
Uh-huh.
same year as Pirates of the Caribbean. That came out in the summer in June or July.
Oh, so
Whereas
they made it
whereas
without realizing how big of a success the other one was going to be, which
they
is
did. They
interesting.
they said we're just going to start. We got the green light. Let's start turning rides into live action movies and franchises, and that came out in November of 2003. So they might have had time to tinker with it based on the success of Pirates of the
November.
Caribbean.
I
Yeah,
hate when spooky movies come out in November.
right. What's
I,
the
I
point? Well, why not the month earlier?
yeah, I know, and I'm
They
sure
put The
there was lots of
Shining.
competition, and
They put
but
Doctor
like,
Sleep out in November, and everyone said why.
I mean, that does feel like a November movie to me. Um, just for fun, what did you think of Doctor Sleep?
I really enjoyed Doctor Sleep because I did not read the book.
Neither did
I'm
I.
a reader, but I'm
Me too.
also I am. I do read,
Yeah, me too.
other than my social media feed. But the thing is, I do find that if I haven't read something and I know that they're going to make it a movie, I have a personal rule not to read it until I've seen the movie because I always know that I'm going to compare it, and the movie more often than not disappoints.
Of
So
course.
my when I if I know I want to see the movie and I'm interested in seeing what they're doing, that's my practice. So I hadn't read Doctor Sleep, um, and I thought it was really well done. I think they should have called it like Overlook.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though the book is called Doctor Sleep, I think they could have taken some license because I
They
think
could have,
they had a real
yeah.
hard time marketing it. I don't think anyone knew
It,
what the heck it
yes,
was.
I don't. They definitely did not do so great, which kind of makes sense, and it
Did you
has
like
nothing to
it?
do
Are
with the
you a
quality.
huge
I,
Shining fan or King fan? Or?
I did not like it, and I'm a big Stephen King fan. I'm not a huge Shining fan. I don't love the book very much. I do love the film.
Mhm.
It's not my favorite Stephen King moment, and there was something about this movie that I don't know if it just really didn't resonate with me. I found it, I don't know, awkward. I don't know. It just didn't work
I do
for
have
me.
to throw in that as I was watching it, even though I thought it was very well cast, especially I was impressed that Jack Torrance was played by Henry Thomas,
Yes,
aka
that was the best
Elliot
part.
from E.T.
Yes, the
But
Shining stuff was the best part
I have
in
to
it.
say, as I was watching it in the theater, I was thinking to myself, well, I'll definitely watch this again once they deep fake everyone to be, Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson
Ugh, but
and
that I
Scannon
forget
Crothers,
that, and I love that actress too. I'm sad that I forgot her name. The one that
Yeah.
played what's the
Wendy,
name of the wife? Yes, she did such a
Wendy
great job.
Torrance.
Wendy Torrance, and the bringing back the lady in the bathtub was really
Right?
effective and scary too.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I actually just read that book this this October. Um, it's okay. There's so many other Stephen King books that I would recommend over that one, I think.
My Stephen King, the glory of I can't wait till I read another one was in his probably first quarter of all the things that he wrote.
A long
I
time
think I
ago.
sort of slowed down after the drawing of the three, or
Uh-huh.
the
So the
Bachman.
80s, once
Yeah,
mid 80s is when you kind of pulled out, but
yeah,
it was
or
still
late '80s,
quintessential.
really. But yeah, but
Yes, late
I
80s.
mean, I read cover to cover. I read it's The Stand is one of my all time great books, favorite
Yep.
books. The first one I ever
70s one.
read was literally I was in the school library and there was Carrie, and I knew about the
Oh,
movie.
that's
And I
his first
heard
one.
of Stephen King, and so I sat down. I said, "Well, let's see what this is about." And I literally read about three-quarters of the book sitting in the spot that I sat down in to read a page, because it was that much of a page turner, and that was what made me a fan. Between that and Night Shift, his short stories.
Oh yeah, the short stories are what get you.
But I digress.
Yes. I also want to say my favorite collection has to be Skeleton Crew, because while some of his worst stories are in there, dear God, some of the best stories I've ever read are in that one.
Absolutely,
Like,
absolutely.
but to get back to the Haunted Mansion reboot, because that's why we're here. Um, so yes, Del Toro announced that he was stepping back when he was working on Pacific Rim, but in 2015, Ryan Gosling announced to be in talks to star in the reboot, and that Guillermo del Toro was still on producing and directing. Ryan Gosling has actually been associated with the macabre himself. His musical act, Dead Man's Bones, is actually released one album of really good spooky indie music. I know
Ooh.
it's hard to believe because because he's a celebrity, and what is good indie spooky music? This is it. I swear.
Well, Ryan Gosling is he's a famous monsters kid. He's a monster kid who did
You
Aurora
can.
models and just loved all that stuff. And also Ryan Gosling has been attached, because he's the cream of the crop. He's been
Mhm.
attached to a number of projects, and one of the projects he was attached to, and this is a tangential thought, is that he was attached to Logan's Run, and that
Oh,
has been in development hell for an eternal amount of time.
that's an interesting one.
But at one point when he was attached to that, I thought, oh, maybe they'll finally make this Logan's Run remake, which they don't need to make, but let's see how it goes.
It's interesting. Even if you have Ryan Gosling, it does not mean that you're getting out of development hell anytime soon.
I think this 2003 Rob Minkoff directed Haunted Mansion starring Eddie Murphy. There's always a variety of reasons why people, the studio execs get cold feet. But they always think that, well, it's a recognizable name. Just make some project around it and it'll do gangbusters. And they kind of thought, they made a Sorcerer's Apprentice movie. That was a
Yes,
one-off.
they did.
But
Didn't go good.
at a certain point, if it was
Financially speaking.
a Jerry Bruckheimer film, then they were just like, anything will make a mint at the box office. For a while there, that was a true statement. But I think in the wake of this movie, which did not do so badly, I think it made like $75 million at the box office, but they only compared it to the runaway hit of
$190 million, actually.
Was it 180?
$190 million off of a $90 million budget.
Worldwide?
Yes.
There you go. So
you're only counting. Oh wow, how Western centric of you.
Yes, exactly. Well, come on. What else is there? No,
that's true.
Don't put me in that box. No.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
So worldwide. Well, what I'm ultimately getting at is it did not do nearly as well as Pirates of the Caribbean. So yeah, in their mind, it is a flop.
Well, also considering how much they put into marketing, like, do you think that it probably just broke even in a way at the end of the day?
Yeah. For Disney. They were going to do a Disney for Disney XD. They were going to do a Haunted Mansion animated special. Chris Grimley, who's an amazing artist, I think he was art directing or executive producing that. I had lunch with them, and he told me about that.
Cool.
Back in the day, and I'm a huge fan of Chris Grimley. If people don't know him, you should totally check out his art.
But what a name!
Yeah, Gris, Gris, Grimley, Grimly. Probably not his birth name, but we'll go with it.
Oh, okay. I'm going to assume that it is.
But yeah, this was back in 2014. They announced he was going to art direct it, and he told me, because I did a thing with him for Famous Monsters. But anyway, I digress, because that never got made either. And that languished in development hell in its own little corner of non-theatrical development hell thing. But I think we've said about everything we could say about that.
Well, yeah, I'm glad. Listen, I know that there's only so many Haunted Mansion properties that they're ever going to produce. So I'm hoping that most of the ones we get are going to be like theatrical scale, even though we'll get to the fact that they are making a Disney Muppet.
Right, a Muppet version. What is it? Muppet Haunted Mansion, right?
Yes,
for Disney
which I'm
Plus.
extremely excited about. Like, what more could we ever ask for?
Yeah.
The little trailer they made was adorable, and
I think Disney, like I was saying, in the wake of failures, Disney they know that they've got a good thing going, and that some people believe in it and some people don't, and so they test the viability in different ways. And I think, they tested it. I think a lot more than we realize is riding on Disney, the Muppet Haunted Mansion special. And I fear that with the Muppets not being as huge as they used to be, it might not do as well. And then,
but it's Disney Plus, so they can pretend. Well, they'll know.
They'll know. They'll look. The bean counters behind the scenes will be looking at that and saying, well, this is going to translate into, $200 million franchise. But you never know. I mean,
you don't know.
If you look at, Disney has definitely, they've made a whole comic book, graphic novel, arguably, series of the Haunted Mansion.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, there's I guess I could just call it a comic book. There's a whole comic book series of Haunted Mansion stuff, and so they put that stuff out there, and they're constantly creating new merch at the Haunted Mansion. That they now, they only in the last maybe calendar year or two released Haunted Mansion stuff at the Disney stores that they have around the globe. And these are all sort of little litmus tests, to see if people really still love this as much as we would like them to.
Yeah, or maybe it's sort of just getting it back out there, just trying to, it's like a promo of some kind. They, it's like on Drag Race, how you haven't seen a contestant in a long time, and she'll make the Christmas special before she makes All Stars. I don't assume that you'll know what I mean by that, but I think some people will.
The Haunted Mansion comic book series, I think it debuted in 2016.
Oh, so it's recent.
Yeah, and there's a thing called Disney Kingdoms, and so it's like I think a 5-part series or something like that under the Disney Kingdom's umbrella.
I'm familiar, maybe as like there's so many different Disney verticals. It's hard to keep track of all of
Yeah,
them.
but
But
I think what I
I'm
will
here for
say
it.
is that as a fan of Haunted Mansion, like I looked at those comics, I didn't get them, but I did buy a Haunted Mansion book that was essentially the grim gritting ghost song and the lyrics with beautiful
Cool.
illustrations, and I bought that for my kid, and that brought me as much joy. I get to
If
live
not more,
vicariously. I
yes,
get to
I'm here
live
with you.
vicariously through my own kid as an excuse to buy things for myself. I
I
am
must
not
say,
gonna lie about
yeah, one of the only things that seem appealing to me about having a kid is all of the gateway horror properties that I get to traumatize them with, hopefully.
We're at the stage where we will go to a store and I will look at something and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to get this. And my son will look at me and say, is that going to be for you or for me?
Both of you, it's a family. It's fine.
We'll
I love
share
it.
it, but I get the cooler one. No.
What was your gateway horror as like a kid? Like, yeah, you might have mentioned this already, but I don't know. I'm
Well,
scooping
yeah,
back
I mean,
around.
I was a total monster kid. I loved horror. I loved monster movies. I called them monster movies when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Horror was not a word I used, but I watched Godzilla and kaiju, and kaiju wasn't even a word back then for me. But Godzilla movies and all of Godzilla's friends, Gamera and Mothra and Ghidorah,
Hmm.
or Ghidorah, depending on which movie, and but all those and the Universal monsters. I mean, I loved through and through, Creature from the Black Lagoon and Dracula and Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all that stuff like that. The Mole People, the Hammer horror stuff. I mean, I just ate that stuff up and I watched it on a tiny little black and white TV,
How it's
on
meant to be
Saturday
watched.
afternoons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it's meant. That's what the medium was
On,
for.
on on legit rainy days when I could, make the stars align. But
Oh my God, it's like you're in Derry, Maine. I feel like you were. I'm picturing it.
but I was always into anything that required and anything that sparked my imagination. I really connected with, and I'd watch these things, and I'd watch it on TV, or I'd watch it in the movies, or I'd watch it as a revival. I saw the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on the big screen because my mom took me, and it rocked my world. And I saw Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein on the
Cool.
big screen, even though it was the small screen at my local public library. It was a Saturday afternoon when it was projected, and
Nice.
this changed my world. And I'd race
Yeah.
home and draw it all on paper. I'd make
Uh-huh.
my own comics in relation to the stuff I did, or just I'd draw my own scenes. And so
Wow.
I've always been an imaginative kid,
Hmm.
and so doing what I get to do now, I've always known growing up that I could not, my dad was the guy who put on a suit and had a briefcase and went to, Madison Avenue and, New York City. And I never wanted to be that. I
That's the
admired my
real
dad
horror.
and I knew he was great.
That's the true spooky stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That scared
Hmm.
me more
I'm
than
scared.
any of these things that I watched. And so I
Y-
figured one
Yeah.
day if I can make a living doing things that I always loved as a kid and never quite having to give it up, I'll do it. And I get to do it now.
I love it. I'm jealous. I'm still living the terror that maybe one day I'll have to do social media work again. So
Well,
who
but
knows?
you clearly have one foot in something that you love because we're doing this
Oh yeah.
podcast now.
And like, when I was thinking, well, what podcast would I ever want to do? Like this was such an obvious answer for me because this is something I've been obsessed with since I was a little kid.
Well, it's a good angle. I genuinely believe that because it's when I made In Search of Darkness Part Two, one of the chapters in there was unmade projects,
Oh, I'm familiar.
and well, there you go. And so
Hmm.
having like Stuart Gordon talking about his Shadow over Innsmouth that he never quite got to make,
Oh yeah,
you
it's my
know,
favorite section. Are
or
we gonna get another section like that in part 3?
I can't say. Maybe
How
I don't
dare
know. It
you? How
depends if
dare?
I.
Keeping us waiting.
I'm focused on In Search of Tomorrow right now. So In Search
Okay,
of
that makes sense.
Darkness, I'll get to that next.
I really wanted to come see you guys at Beyond Fest. I think it was 2019,
Yeah,
and
2019 in October,
I
where we
did.
premiered it.
Yeah. Yep. I had a short film in the festival circuit at the time, and we didn't get into Beyond Fest, and there's only so much travel money, and then it didn't happen, and after COVID hit, I regret not going to everything that I wanted to go to.
Well, I'm sorry you couldn't make it, and I'm sorry. I'm sure. I'm glad you got your film seen in other places.
We did, thank goodness.
Well, we were the tail end of a 3 day. Sorry, 3 day. During that day that we premiered it was a Sunday evening, and during the day, Tom Atkins was there,
Whoa.
and it was a trio of his films. I think it was
Did you
Night
say
of the
Halloween
Creeps.
3?
I want to say it was Night of the Creeps, Halloween 3, maybe Maniac Cop. I can't remember what the third
Wow,
one
can you
was.
imagine if those were your films? You could just, like, fuck everyone else. Everyone's garbage, you know?
So we were there at the tail end of that where we said, "Here's my 4.5 hour movie. Enjoy." And so,
Yeah, it is a 4.5 hour movie,
but
which I, oh, yes.
well, I was going to
I
say I
want
give
more
these
of them.
people incredible. I give them credit for. We didn't do it 4 hours straight. We did 2 hours, and then we took a break and had a Q&A, and then we just and the guys who
They're
run that
cool.
because they make it all cool,
Yeah,
and that
they
was the
do.
first time that anybody was seeing the movie, and I got to see it
Oh,
for the
okay.
first time on the big screen myself.
Oh, cool.
And
I
the
love
fact
that.
that people were like cheering when their movie would be chosen, or Joe Dante makes a clip about black and white films, and the Psycho remake, and everyone laughs, and he gets the biggest laugh of the night. That was just absolute pure joy for me.
I bet. It sounds beautiful, honestly. That is the word that I would pick. And also Beyond Fest, even though they're a new festival, have quickly become, maybe one of the most exciting genre festivals on this side of the world.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. So I want to jump into maybe why the Haunted Mansion reboot didn't. Okay, well, this iteration of the Haunted Mansion reboot didn't happen. And we don't have these answers. So I had to speculate wildly. But that's what I'm going to do right now. So in 2012, Alan Horn became the studio chairman of the Walt Disney Studios, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And several huge changes ensued after that. So I believe this is the time when they started buying Marvel properties. I think it was just phase 1 first, but then they also picked up Indiana Jones films, Lucas films,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the whole Star Wars trilogy, and it just and then Marvel completely, I believe, in 2015. So it seemed like you were talking about how a recognizable IP was safe for them, even
Yes.
with the Haunted Mansion. It's an IP people recognize. But in 2012, with Alan Horn, it really felt like they were doubling or tripling down on recognizable IPs to the point of, huge, huge IPs were given the priority over everything else.
Well,
And
between that and the massive failure of John Carter of Mars, it should have been called John
yes.
Carter of Mars, but it was John Carter.
Yeah, I
That's
remember.
the reason why they put the Tron Legacy follow up. They put that into turnaround. They were going to remake the Black Hole with Joseph
Cool. That
Kosinski
would have
doing
been
that.
awesome.
That got sidelined. And that's all because of Marvel and the Lucasfilm acquisition and doubling down on pretty much paying back the $1 billion or the $4 billion that cost, or the many billions. I mean, they've already recouped their investment just from the merchandising
I'm
alone.
sure. And
But
I'm sure
that
it
being
was a
said,
great move, but
that's the reason why we're not getting some of these other
some of
arguably
these
franchise
properties,
titles. Yeah, yeah.
I feel like it seemed like we weren't going to, and then progressed. We are seeing these titles come out just in ways we wouldn't have imagined. Like with Alien, I was worried that Disney, was going to sit on the Alien franchise, but of course now we have the Alien TV series
Right,
coming.
and with Noah Hawley doing it, of all people running
Who's
it,
that?
that's
Can you
Noah
inform me?
Hawley. He's the guy who turned Fargo into a TV series
Oh my God,
with the
that's
blessing and the help of and the autonomy of his own vision,
an amazing
and made it
series.
amazing. One of the best
Very amazing.
shows on television. So
Yes.
by all means, do Alien because you can't. It's only uphill from the last.
And they finally are bringing it to Earth. I don't know if you're familiar, but I feel like nerds have been
They
begging.
promised that in the teaser trailer for Alien 3, but I doubt it.
Yes, I know that. I do. I did an episode. One of my biggest episodes was on Alien 5
Mm-hmm.
because it's just so infamous, I guess.
Right, right.
But yeah, I had a deep dive into all of this alien stuff.
I'm all about the retcon. I
Are
think
you? I'm okay with that.
I'm completely fine with retconning because canon. The older these things get, the more material that goes into the pipeline to make a franchise live, the more it could just go in radical directions that no one agrees with. And so, at a certain point, if you just want to, erase the whiteboard or wipe the whiteboard and start fresh and just bring back, Hicks and Newt and Ripley. Turns out they turned left instead of right in Albuquerque, and it was all a bad dream. I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
But what about all of these movies sharing the same title? Like 3 movies being called Halloween, 2 movies being called Scream.
Halloween, Predator, Predator, Alien, Alien.
Yeah,
right?
it makes my OCD just like a little bit on edge. I do love a subtitle.
Yeah, I understand. I just understand. Having been in development myself, and I was never one of the suits. I was a lackey. I was the guy
Sure.
who. I was.
You were a blazer. It's
well,
fine.
that was
it's the
why
same thing.
I wanted to get out. Is because listen, if you want to hit a quick digression, I mean, I was the guy who I did script. I did script coverage and I did all sorts of stuff like that. But one of the things I would have to do is we'd say, all right, foreign sales for a certain movie, put together a wish list cast. And it would be for some movie that was just like a dopey, like Dolph Lundgren movie or something like that. And I knew it would be either Dolph Lundgren or Jean-Claude Van Damme would ultimately be the person cast in this movie. And I the first time I ever did it, I put this list together, and they looked at me sternly, and I got reprimanded because I didn't put Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the A-listers at the top. And I was just like, but they'll never do this movie. And they said, put them on the list.
Oh my God. Yeah, I believe that.
And I was just like, all right, if you want to be deluded, that's why it is called a wish list, I guess,
Yeah, this obsession with celebrity. I guess it just is coinciding with obsession with money, because that's what celebrity is, I guess, for these people.
The biggest pain, again, with this digression or this tangent is that I would read some really great scripts and I would have to pass on them simply because it wasn't the type of movie that we would make. So I'd recommend it. I'd say, this is a great script, but it's not for us. But here's why it is a great script if you ever want to help it get made from someone else. But I passed on so many amazing scripts, and I had to move a lot of mediocre scripts, through the pipeline, or even bad scripts where it was a good concept, but it was really poorly written. Just saying, good concept, buy it, rewrite it, and make it, But the whole thing left a real sort of.
Did you ever get to see any of those tragedy scripts that you had to pass on but were beautiful get made elsewhere?
Yeah, I would say of all the scripts that I read when I was reading them as only scripts, the one movie that did get made that I really thought was really quite good was Donnie Darko.
Wow, you got Donnie Darko.
Yeah, I got Donnie Darko,
and it's iconic.
And I said, I notably said, this is a good script. We should make this. And they said,
yeah.
And they said, we're not doing horror, so pass.
Well, it wasn't horror. You know what? How do you sell Donnie Darko? I could not tell you, but
it's more, Twilight Zone, I suppose, for anyone to be able to try and connect to it.
Would it have been made? Would it have been a bigger film where you were than it ended up being?
No.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, no.
Did you work for Flower Films for Drew Barrymore? Was that you?
No, but it ended up going to Flower, and then Flower did it. So
yes, I know.
Yeah,
and she was in it. Good for you, Drew. Love you, Drew.
It was a long time ago, so I cannot remember how I got it. Because I worked for MDP Worldwide, which is Mark Damon Productions. He was the guy who kind of brought Das Boot to America and pioneered the foreign territory.
Sorry, what did he bring to America?
Das Boot. Wolfgang Petersen. It's a German U-boat thriller from the 80s, and it's really good.
Well, I'm a homosexual.
I think then
guy, and I just don't know what that is.
Well, for all listen, gay, straight, or
Jewish,
however you want to declare it, a bunch of sweaty men in a bunch of sweaty seamen in a tube.
Oh my God! What have I done? What have I done? This is
right. The pitch is there for you.
It's right there. All right.
Anyway,
my mistake.
But I go ahead.
Yeah, so this was my roundup to why this didn't happen. Do you, as someone that is closer to this world than I am, would you have any other takes to why Guillermo del Toro's maybe slipped through the cracks?
Guillermo del Toro is infamous for taking on a variety of projects all at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, with the hopes that if he champions 10 movies at a time, 15 movies at a time, he'll get to keep making them. And so he announces them as if it's going to be his next film, with all the hopes and dreams that it will be. But he just keeps the plates spinning. And, he was going to do Pacific Rim 2. He
I
didn't
know.
get to do that. But I remember I was talking to him and he said, oh, I'm in the middle of scouting for Pacific Rim 2, while I was talking to him about Crimson Peak.
Cool.
But he just doesn't make these things because he wants to, but he's got so much else going on, and if it just doesn't, you try and strike while the iron's hot, and if the money isn't there and it languishes, he's on to the next. And I
Mm.
think he wishes he could clone himself and do all of these things, but
Yeah, we need to
he's
give him a,
still
a time turner.
His own version of Frankenstein, Pinocchio, all these things like that.
Yeah, Pinocchio is actually, that must have been, what, 15 years in the works, and I think it is actually happening with Netflix.
Yeah, well, good.
I know. It's nice to see when they survive.
Any Guillermo movie that gets made and distributed, I will see it regardless.
Oh, me too. I'm ravenous for it. Well,
and I would just want to add also,
yeah.
you think the dynamic would be different after The Shape of Water, because
Of course it's not, though.
Yeah,
It's
for
like
5 minutes he was the most powerful guy in Hollywood, but then
yeah, I know.
passes.
And I feel like all the cool kids turned on that movie the second it won Best Picture, and I was so sad. I was like,
Right,
it
right.
deserves
Well,
it.
if the Academy
Let him have
recognizes
it.
it can't be good,
Let
can't be real.
the chubby spooky man have it. It's something, this is, I relate, and I just want to see my kind succeed.
Yeah.
So, the future of the Haunted Mansion. A lot of the projects that I covered don't really have a bright future, and that's not the case. So, we actually have some really good news for this IP. In 2020, Katie Dippold, I don't know if I'm saying that right,
Mhm.
a writer on Parks and Rec and The Heat, was attached to write a new screenplay. So, it's pretty clear that they're going in a comedy direction again. Producer Dan Lin got attached to co-produce, and then a year later we saw Justin Simeon of Dear White People, Bad Hair, and I believe the 2006 short film Rings, which was like a in the Rings universe, and it was really good if I recall.
Yeah,
It's too bad it
well,
yeah.
sorry to jump in there, but he's also doing the Lando TV show for
Disney
Lucasfilm and
Plus?
for Disney Plus. Yeah,
Well, that
yeah,
makes okay.
he's part of that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. He's great. The Dear White People film is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
The TV show is also excellent. I haven't seen Bad Hair yet, and I thought, should I watch The Haunted Mansion 2003 or should I watch Bad Hair? And I made the wrong choice.
You chose poorly.
I think I chose poorly. Have you seen Bad Hair?
I have not, but
I am desperate to see it. I think Nicole Byer is in it, and I'm a big fan of hers. So it's a really interesting choice for director. It's pretty exciting to see who they're going with. Do I prefer a Del Toro sensibility of spookiness, darkness? Yes. Is this a surprising direction? Yeah, and I think I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Del Toro has a very, very, very distinct visual style. He's up there. Tim Burton, Del Toro are both cut from the same cloth, but you could definitely put them in different quadrants in terms of their style and the way that things look. And arguably, they both suffer a little bit from narrative momentum and. They excel if they have a really great script. If they don't have a really great script, it always looks great, but it might not be the best film.
I don't know. I feel like one of them really should have stopped in about 2003.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms. But
Imagine if I meant Guillermo del Toro. No, it's obviously not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but Del Toro himself was saying for the longest time with Haunted Mansion was that they just couldn't quite crack the script.
Well, yeah. And then he also said that he had 3 scripts that he thought were ready to go and good. So I don't know. I really wish I could have seen what he would have done. Although at the end of the day, I didn't like Crimson Peak, so maybe I am just greedy, 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 and I don't even know what I want.
I think this has to be whimsical. It cannot be creepy.
Yes,
Um,
I
I
agree.
think it has to be, the sort of the ghostly colors and the ornate, Gothic mansions or whatever. Is it Victorian mansion, Gothic mansion, or they're one of each actually on either side? Either
Oh, sure.
way, it just has to really, 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 really be true to the Disney Imagineers and their vision, because
Yes.
I think that's the only way to really sell it to those of us who care enough to see it in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a good feeling about it though, and it does seem like they're paying close attention to Haunted Mansion because, as we talked about, there's going to be the Muppet special for Halloween. I feel like a lot of people we've just talked about them for a little while, but I think people were like disappointed to see the Muppets get absorbed by Disney and kind of feel like they're a little bit. I don't know if neutered's the right word, but
I wouldn't
not.
say they've been well. I would just say they've
It's
been
not the right word at all.
marginalized. I've been say they were marginalized because they were bought Henson. They bought Henson a long time ago,
Yes.
and then never quite did anything with them. So at the peak
Uh
of the
huh.
Muppet popularity and power, it felt like a bit of a strange union. It felt right, but it felt like, well, why does Disney need the Muppets other than to squash them? That's really
Yeah.
how I felt. I mean,
Well,
it's
maybe
kind
they
of
did
sad, but it's like, well, the Muppets are gaining strength and power and popularity. Our characters are languishing, because we're not
because of it.
making new Mickey Mouse animated movies. So
Wow,
why don't we
so
just buy
evil.
them and put them in a corner and let them collect dust and put out
What is
crappy
more
toys?
evil than doing that to the Muppets? That's
But I feel like that,
Hitler level.
history has demonstrated that's kind of what they did.
Yes. Well, and they aren't historically the kindest of companies, ironically. So,
Yeah.
oh, that doesn't surprise me. Although that 2007 reboot film was adorable.
Yes, 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 yes. I thought they did two of them.
Yes, and
Um,
the second one was less adorable.
I don't know. I think that it's very hard to put my finger on. I mean, I just had my own personal
Hmm.
experience with my own kid who never took to them as much as I
Okay.
tried to say, "Hey, let's watch, the Muppets." He
Weird
only
faux
wanted to watch
puppets.
animated things,
Yeah.
and
Eh,
so
it's different generation.
he'd kill me for saying it because he's way over it now. But like,
Hmm.
the likes of Paw Patrol, and
Uh
he
huh.
did watch. He watched a lot of the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that kind of
Uh
stuff,
huh. Yeah.
which I thought was actually really good. I was like, oh my god, I have to watch this, and it turned out to be, I thought,
I,
really
I love
wonderful
that.
for
Good.
because I had a lot of
Good.
problem solving and so on and so forth. And I digress.
Listen, if
But
Disney can't do it, no one can.
yeah, yeah. But he never quite took to the Muppets, and that's kind of the point. And
Hmm.
so now that he's older, and I want to be like, oh, the Muppet movie is so fun because it's funny. He doesn't know the
Yes,
word
it is.
subversive means, but it's in there, and I want to sort of explain that to him, and it's wacky nonetheless. But I guess
It's adorable.
the the alternative is that he's starting to get into the Pink Panther movies. So
Okay.
that's a win in that column for me, even though it's sort of
Well,
that.
I feel like you're doing a good job. I feel like he's being led down the right path.
I'm
Doesn't mean
trying.
he has to come with you, but it sounds like he is. So,
I'm trying. He likes some. He rejects others.
that's funny. I feel like I'm the one that got my dad into horror when I was a kid. But however we get there, there's no wrong way.
You got your dad into horror because you were
Yeah,
into
yeah.
it,
When I
and
was like, we found it together. Like he never liked it, and I was fascinated and wanted to try it, and he was like, okay with it. And then now we're both huge horror hounds.
well, that's
So
cool. Well, but
it was
also
like,
it's a bonding experience. It's like
oh, absolutely.
it's a genre excuse to be together and enjoy something and talk about it. And so,
Oh, I would say horror
what
is
what
like
better reason?
50% of what me and my dad talk about, and I don't say that with any sadness.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I think we're nearing the end, and I just want to say, where can we find you online if you want to be found?
If I want to be found online, I have a blog called itcamefromblog.com. And on socials, it's at itcamefromblog. And that's my sort of steady stream of pop culture brain dump thoughts and writings. And a lot of the interviews I've done, whether it was Entertainment Tonight or Famous Monsters or even just independent for the blog itself, it's all there. and then everything related to In Search of Darkness and In Search of Tomorrow. My Twitter account is pretty much the one I do the most, and that's Tiki Ambassador. And you can find all about the movies from there, at 80shorrordoc.com or at 80ssci-fi.doc. Way too many socials I've thrown at you, but start with.
I know, but I've seen them all, and they're all doing good. So, did you say Tiki? Because I feel like that. Huh?
Yeah, Tiki. Yeah,
because I feel like that itself has a bit of a haunted mansion association.
Well, just down the street, so to speak, is the Tiki room.
Yes.
And I get my that's.
And they had a reference to that in the 2003 movie, which was kind of cute.
Yeah. That Polynesian pop and all that. Your backyard oasis and mixology of drinks. And if you go to Trader Sam's at Disney is the ultimate tiki bar, because you buy certain drinks and certain things happen either behind the bar or like a volcano.
Oh, that's so cool!
It's
I'm
the
such a sucker for shit like that.
Disney coolness,
I love
like you got a sea breeze or whatever it's called. All of a sudden, the whole place gets into like a storm at sea, and there's like a shipwreck. It's so fun.
Before we allow you freedom, I'm going to ask you, when I was, so 1997, when we went to Disney World, it was MGM Studios. I remember we went to this like 1950s diner, and it was black and white, if I recall, like everything was black and white, and the waitresses yelled at you. Does that sound familiar to you at all?
Well, there was a very famous restaurant called Ed DeBivic's, and I want to say that originated in Chicago. But the novelty of it was you would go there to have, the servers would be intentionally obnoxious to you, even though they were nice. They weren't cruel, but they were, the whole, it was a 50s themed restaurant where they would be obnoxious to you. Certain songs would play and they'd blast it, and everyone would get on the tables and dance. All the busboys would drop what they were doing and jump on the bar and dance. And
that's so cool.
It was very, 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 very fun. And I would think that it was an extension of that, where it was
probably
literal.
Maybe it wasn't black and white, but it definitely was 50s. Yes. Yeah. And they yell at you to go wash your hands, and it was just like
that sounds like it might have been
theater.
Ed DeBivic's.
Okay, that's great. That's one of my long lost memories that we've now unpacked. So hopefully I'm okay after this. Well, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for coming on Development Hell. I'm so grateful. This was a really fun topic. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Josh. I appreciate being invited, and I really enjoy talking about this kind of stuff because it's a little different than promoting a movie, which I'm always happy to do, but just any geekery, So
yes, truly. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with another episode of Development Hell. Coming soon to Dread, The Maid. Joy is the new maid of a royal house, whose previous maid disappeared under mysterious circumstances and is now haunting and terrorizing the family. Joy works to uncover the reason behind the former maid's disappearance. The Maid will be made available on demand everywhere July 20, 2021, and on Blu-ray August 17th, 2021.